The National Treasury is here because the biggest issue now, after all the discussions from COP21 to COP28, is about finance. Because climate mitigation and adaptation requires that we raise money for both mitigation and adaptation. So we have a huge financing gap between what we require and the resources available. And that is why we are here today. In this COP, I have been briefed that so far as of today, total finance that has been pledged is $571 million. And this is for all the 154 countries that are members of the Conference of Parties under UNFCCC. So how much will come to Kenya will, of course, be determined later. But just to say that for us as a country, for the next 10 years, between 2020 and 2030, we require $62 billion. So in Kenya shillings, that's about 7 trillion to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. Of that 62 billion, about 29% is for mitigation. That is, in dollar terms, is about $18 billion. So it's about 2.2 trillion Kenya shillings. And again, that's for 10 years. This is where the bulk of money of climate finance is coming to Kenya. It's coming to more on mitigation than on adaptation. And in this mitigation, a lot of it also is by way of loans, and we have very few grants. And you know, we are, as a country, we are not really responsible for this climate change because our emissions are quite low, but we are bearing the biggest impact of climate change. I just came from home where we had to release about $50 million, which is about actually 7 billion Kenya shillings, to deal with the floods that have ravaged our country. You know that part of northern Kenya is cut off. Mombasa and many other parts are really affected. So we are suffering huge losses as a result of floods due to climate change. And before these floods, we just came out of a prolonged period of drought, the worst in the last 40 years. So if we are not in drought, we're in situations of floods. And so it has become a key concern because climate change now is a matter of existential threat. It is a matter. It's an emergency, and which is why we want to be here, because we want to raise our voice to make sure that we get the money that is required under our NDC, which we submitted. I indicated we need $62 billion or 7 trillion Kenya shillings. We pledged that Kenya would raise 13% of that amount. The balance of 87% would be from our international partners, particularly developed countries who are responsible for the emissions. This money is not much. If you look at it on average, we require 700 billion. If you divide by 10, 700 billion per year. But what we are getting so far from Global Environmental Facility, Green Climate Finance, even FLOCA, what we call Financing Local Climate Actions, and all other like Adaptation Fund, plus our own budget, we have less than $100 million, or actually about 1.5 trillion, which is quite low. So there is a huge gap, financing gap. And so our being here is really to try and make sure that we raise our voice and ask most of those who have pledged to honor the pledges. Because I think we have had so many times promises. And we need to match those promises with action. What we require now is money. For Kenya, we have been a climate leader. And we have good account of what we have done. We have come up with we have mainstreamed climate change in our plans, our development plans, our policies, our regulatory frameworks, and our laws. And we have done sufficient amount of work but then what we require now is money, which is why I'm here and with my cabinet secretary, because we really need to make sure that we raise the money required for us to build the adaptation required, to build resilience in our communities. Make sure that in the agriculture sector, we have the right quality of seeds, the right technology, and the infrastructure that is resilient for with the climate change that we keep experiencing.
What do you think about the loss and damage fund?
I think there is some progress on the loss and damage, because in COP27 there was an agreement to operationalize the fund, and there was a committee which was set up to move ahead. And I am told that much of the pledges that I spoke about earlier, of $571 million, is to that fund, which is the loss and damage fund. We will be able to know the total amount after this COP28. To me, COP29 will be more about really finance. I don't think we will have anything else to discuss. It must be about whether we are raising the money we have pledged, because we have been just pledging and pledging and pledging. You know, remember the 100 billion that the developed countries agreed to support the developing countries by 2020. Every year they would raise at least 100 billion. That is not forthcoming. We are still much behind. I know there's a target now for 2025, but again, it becomes a problem because climate change is really a threat to us. We are feeling it every day, and we require urgent actions. And so for us, we are asking those responsible to really honor their pledges, including operationalizing the loss and damage.